Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits. Joining me today is Cyndi Meuchel to talk about volunteering. Cyndi, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate you having me on. I think this is going to be fun.
I definitely hope so because we haven't talked about volunteering yet, so it's a brand new virgin topic to discuss.
Oh, how exciting.
Before we get started, though, I wanted to make sure people knew your superhero origin story. That is to say, how did you get started working with nonprofits?
Oh, gosh, do we have enough time? I actually started working with nonprofits, believe it or not, when I was 8 years old. And my parents were avid volunteers way back in the day. And they decided that all of us kids were going to be volunteers as well. And so at 8 years old, I joined the 4-H club in my area. And I volunteered. I served on boards. I'm not saying I was very good at any of that at 8 years old, but it was instilled very young in my life. And it has just stuck with me since then.
Obviously, you've continued that journey up until today. Maybe you can give just a high-level summary of the major milestones that have led you to where you are today.
Wow. So, yeah, over the years, since I'm now in my 50s, so it's been quite a while, quite a journey. Over the years, I have volunteered in various capacities on boards and on committees and just informally and formally. We can talk about the difference between that later, but I've done that in all sorts of different organizations, wherever there was a need that was close to my heart that I could meet, that I have the skill set for. I would just volunteer where I could. And then one day, about 20 years ago, my now business partner and I met over tea, and we were talking about our latest adventures in volunteering and the fact that there was no financial software that really spoke to the markets, the nonprofit market. There was QuickBooks, of course, but it was overkill for the kind of groups that we were volunteering for. And so based on that conversation, we to create our own software, and that's how MoneyMinder came to be. So over the last 20 years, I still volunteer the same way I did since I was 8, but I also get to work in my professional life with volunteers and help them with their bookkeeping. So it's really fun to see how it's morphed over time. And now I get to help, thousands, if not tens of thousands of people, as opposed to, just here and there.
That's a really cool story. And to be indoctrinated so early into the volunteering world.
Right?
Yeah.
I hated my parents for that when I was young. And now I am so grateful.
Some teachers, or some parents rather, what they want to teach their kids music, or they're very focused on that kind of element. So the volunteering actually is a wonderful way to learn at an early age to contribute back to the community. I think most people tend to think of volunteers in their older ages, not so much in the younger ages.
Right. And the difference is that learning that in a younger age really helps shape you. And I think that's super important. I think that's one thing that I would love to see more of in our world is younger people volunteering at a higher level.
Mm. Is there anything, it might be a hard question to answer because it's been part of your life for all of your life for the most part. What was the stickiness of the volunteering? Like, yes, you were introduced to it at an early age, but there must have been something about it that made you keep coming back to it, to saying that this needs to be an important part of my life.
Yeah, I think that has to do with, what I get out of it. It's giving. You get so much when you give. I don't know if people realize that, but you get so much when you give. You get a feeling of, joy, a feeling of accomplishment, a feeling of helping. It's just a really good feeling in the middle of my heart. And it's almost like an addiction now. We actually talk about people in my business that are serial volunteers. Meaning they just can't not volunteer. And I'm one of those.
So it's almost like a selfish reason that you're giving.
It is really, right? Yeah. It's a win-win. both sides win. So,
And I've heard that before, where there's some allegory or some kind of story where, and I'm going to really bastardize this because I can't remember the details, but the idea that there was like one person who was trying to accumulate as much wealth as they can because they felt that was the best way for them to feel good about themselves. And that didn't work. And then at some point they decided to volunteer or to give things and to make other people happy. And the reward system in our biology was triggered. And all of a sudden they flipped switch. And then now we went to a situation where they're always giving, volunteering, donating. And that made that person significantly happier
right,
as a result.
right. I'm a firm believer. While I know we all need money to live, I don't think money buys happiness. I think you have to find things that fulfill you and places where you can give back. And that really creates happiness. It gets you out of yourself.
It definitely, it makes you, like I always thought that, and I still think that traveling, for example, is a great way to get out of your comfort zone to realize how connected we are.
Absolutely.
And I think volunteering is a great, I'm going to put it as a close second, just in my opinion, but it's definitely another great way to connect with people, to realize that we're part of a community. It's society can really benefit from more people contributing back to it. And we feel just more connected. All those perceived barriers between people seems to fall away because we realize at a fundamental level, we are nearly identical in every regard.
We are.
Everyone.
We absolutely are. We're just all dealt different cards when we're born, right? We get different cards in life. Some people get wonderful cards and other people don't. And so why is it that somebody that is dealt good cards, they should just take it and run? I think we're dealt those cards to help one another and to do our best, with those cards, not to keep them for ourselves.
And they say that when the lowest, I don't mean that right picture, but the one who needs the most amount of help, when they get help, everyone benefits out of it.
Everyone does, right? Yep.
There was something like, if there are people, for example, and I'm going to use the word India, people in India who might be able to be the next Einstein, but they don't have the ability to pursue that endeavor because they are lacking certain basic needs. That if those basic needs are met, then they would be able to contribute more back to the world. So the idea is that if we can help people raise their general standard of living to a certain point where their basic fundamental needs are taken care of, then people can start giving back again. It's like a circle that feeds itself.
Can you imagine this country or this world where people are constantly lifting each other up and helping each other out? I dream of that.
Yeah.
I think it's possible.
I love your optimism. I would love that to be true. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed because that would be a wonderful. So you kind of alluded to it as well. Then what do you think, in your opinion, is the current state of volunteering today? Because it's not that yet for sure. Where are we today? And if you had to stick up a pulse on I don't know if you have any metrics or ideas about how many people are volunteering or what kind of people are volunteering, but I don't get the strong impression that volunteering is a very strong movement in today's world.
Sadly, Alex, volunteerism is declining in the U.S. I follow these stats. The U.S. Census collects them. There are a few places that collect them, and they release them about every 2 years. And I watch these, and sadly, volunteerism is on the decline. I want to say volunteerism, it's around, what's the stat now? 25% of adult Americans volunteer these days. And it used to be, a few decades ago, it used to be double that. COVID certainly had a negative impact on it, but it is declining. And that's sad to me. But I think it can be reversed in a lot of ways. I'm hopeful.
Any idea why the decline? Like what's causing it? Is it?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of reasons. One of the things that I see is that we're turning into more of a me world as opposed to a we world. We used to be more collective in the way we approached life back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And now we're becoming far more independent. And I think technology has created a lot of that, but not all of it. So what's happening is people are failing to participate, in social clubs or in their unions or, local groups and with charities. They don't have the time. They don't have the interest, some of them. For example, we're having fewer kids nowadays, and kids used to be one of the driving factors of volunteerism. And so with, fewer kids becomes fewer volunteers. We have a segment of the population that's aging out, and not aging out, but aging, and they're not volunteering as much. They're not as able to. So those things kind of change the volunteering landscape. But my belief is that volunteerism, the look and the expectation around volunteerism needs to change. It needs to in order to stay relevant. So no longer, I don't think people have the time or the energy or the desire even to volunteer on the level that they used to back in the 50s or 60s. I think those days are over. I think now, rather than contributing, 80 hours a year volunteering, now people might volunteer more, 20 to 30 hours a year. And I think that's fantastic. I think any level of volunteerism is fantastic. I just think that as a nonprofit, you need to shape your opportunities so people can do what's called micro volunteering, as opposed to having an expectation that they'll be there, 6 hours a week. It's very different.
I want to talk more about the tech issue, because I hear trends, like similar trends as well. And the concept of social media, right, was to connect us more and more. But I read that it's not always the case. Sometimes it can have the opposite effect. Any opinion, any thing you've read about how social media has a paradoxical effect on us, and that might help contribute or understand the explanation of why volunteering is declining?
I don't have any statistics or data to draw from. I have a lot of experience. Let's take a parent group, for example, a PTA at your kids' elementary school. Kids or parents are very busy right now, right? A lot of parents have to work more than one job to make ends meet. They don't have time to participate, to go to the school library and participate in a meeting once a month. So that's different. Nowadays, a lot of that needs to be embraced and needs to happen online. So if you can change your bylaws and allow for virtual meetings and virtual voting, then you're going to have a lot more success as a nonprofit. You have to meet parents where they are. You have to meet volunteers where they are. And so technology can certainly help people come together, but it can also keep people apart. Again, because a lot of people just don't have time or the energy or the desire anymore to go out after they've come home from work at the end of the day. And they don't want to go back out to a meeting. They don't, they're done talking with people. And it's so easy to use technology and just connect online. Let's not talk about the definition of connect online. But, if groups embraced technology and did virtual meetings, you have to change your bylaws to do that, but you have virtual meetings and virtual votes. They're going to be the stronger organizations in the future because they're doing that. COVID helped a lot along those lines. But at the end of the day, you have to create opportunities that people want to respond to. You can't say, gosh, I need help planning this huge fundraising activity that we want to do. Nowadays, you have to say, you know what? I need somebody who would like to promote this on Facebook or something. That's it. That's the one aspect I need somebody to do. Not plan the whole thing. Just do this one aspect of it. That's micro volunteering. And that's what people want right now. And this younger generation, of course, is more technical than ever. Those are the volunteers of our future. We need to leverage their skills. They have skills that we don't have as an older generation. And they can change the shape and the face of volunteerism in a really positive way if we just leverage their skills.
So it seems like being able to meet the younger generation where they are and make them understand or encourage them to understand the benefits to society, to the community. And if you volunteered, here's what your impacts could have. Here's where we can be. Would that be a right way to do it, or anything you want to add to that? Or
I agree with that. And, one thing I would say is most people don't realize this, but pretty much every person in the United States benefits from the work of nonprofits in one way or another. So a lot of us see that when a nonprofit's mission serves a family or neighbor, maybe when a family or a neighbor is a direct beneficiary, it's harder to realize the full impact of that and how it impacts us if we're not the direct beneficiary. Let me say it this way. So, for example, did you know that probably half the hospitals in the US are nonprofit? So you have a 50% chance of being born into a nonprofit hospital. You're a beneficiary there. The March of Dimes, a nonprofit, they raised money for a polio vaccine. That impacted everybody. If you ever learned how to swim through like the YMCA or a scout camp, you were the beneficiary of a nonprofit. It goes on and on. We are beneficiaries whether we realize it or not on a daily basis. And so that's a huge impact on our world. And if we continue to decline with volunteerism, those things go away. So that those things are what create a healthy community, though. And they create economic stability. Those are just key services that just strengthen communities.
In addition to the benefits you get in the feelings you have.
Right. Yeah.
And the positivity and the sense of accomplishment. Right. And that hopefully if you get to a point, even level of addiction where you can't help yourself.
That's a good addiction, sort of.
I think it's a great addiction.
If this younger generation, if we can teach them the value, not only of the result of what they do, but also the value intrinsically that they get, oh my gosh, this world could be highly powered and do some really big positive things. But again, I think it's, so for example, Gen X, I think right now, Gen X, so those are people that are roughly 41 to 56, I'd say right now, they have the highest rate of volunteerism across all generations in the last survey. So that was, I think, 2021 or so. And that's formal volunteering. So formal volunteering is like going through a nonprofit organization and offering some kind of help one way or another, whether that's money, what do they call it? Time, talent, or treasure. So your time, your skill set, or your money. Then there's what's called informal volunteering. And baby boomers had the highest rate of that across all generations back in the last survey. And informal volunteering has more to do with helping a neighbor. Maybe they need help mowing a lawn because they're not able to. Maybe you deliver a meal to them because they can't get out of the house. Maybe you help them fix their car. All sorts of ways to do that. That's informal volunteering. And both of those are incredibly important in this world. But so far, millennials and Gen Z, who are the future of volunteerism, they're just getting started. We need to instill the importance of that to that generation. That's what's important to me right now, so that they can continue it on. They're young. They don't have the resources that, say, baby boomers have or Gen X has yet, but they will. That just takes time, right? That comes with time. And when they do, I'm hoping they're positioned in a place, in a way that they can volunteer their hearts out.
This might be a very detailed question, but so if Gen Z and millennials aren't volunteering now, are they not volunteering at the same level that Gen X and earlier generations? Like, is it an age thing? Like, there's a curve to an age where, just because you're at like a 20-year-old today versus a 20-year-old 20 years ago versus a 20-year-old 40 years ago, are they more or less at the same level of volunteering? And then, as you get older, it kind of increases because you have more time, you have more resources to contribute? Or is it really just a lowering of the curve entirely based on the generation that you were born into?
I think the jury's out. Because you have to remember that every generation lives through different events in their history, right? And those events give them or shape their perspective and their experience and what's important to them. And so, what shaped baby boomers didn't shape millennials, right? So I think the jury's out. I think we have yet to see if that's normal and they're going to, grow into volunteerism, or if volunteerism is not important to them. I don't know. I think it's our job, though, to help them understand the impact of volunteerism and nonprofits, so that they can make an informed decision about whether or not to participate.
Because I've heard that the younger generation these days, or I know that they have a harder time, for example, with the being able to accumulate enough wealth to buy a condo or a house, and this is becoming more and more of a milestone that they will not potentially ever be able to reach. So that tells me there's a certain element of scarcity of limited resources that they do have, that their attention is now focused on just building their own personal wealth, just to be able to feel like they have enough, for themselves before they feel that they can contribute back to the society. So,
and that's a good point, right? Yeah. Because they, it's just like getting on an airplane. They tell you to put your own mask on before you put somebody else's on, right? Or help somebody else with one. It's the same thing. You have to take care of yourself first and get in a good, safe place in Maslow's hierarchy. And then after that, you have capacity to give outside of yourself. But I would argue that if you're able to give outside of yourself, even when some of your needs aren't quite met yet, there is a lot of benefit. I'm not saying it's easy, but there's a lot of benefit.
I would,
for example,
totally agree with you, by the way. I'm going to jump in there. I totally agree with you, because there's a certain measure of I'm going to say this word badly, camaraderie.
Uh-huh.
So the idea is that even if you're not in a position of I'll use the word wealth, even if you're not there, the idea of volunteering and contributing can make you feel wealthy in many different ways.
Right. And it can connect you in ways that you can't even fathom.
And then you might think that what you were aiming for is what you needed, and you might realize there's a whole different path, so that what you really needed was actually much easier to find because it was sitting next to you versus, this big house with cars and whatever.
Right. And one of the interesting byproducts of nonprofits and volunteerism is networking. And networking creates relationships, right? And that's what I think is missing in our country with technology anymore. But that networking can take you places. And that, I don't think that's why you should volunteer, but it's a byproduct. So for example, I can go, to a local organization here in town, and I can help out in whatever way that works for me. And I meet somebody who is, say, the HR director at a company that intrigues me, that I always wanted to work at. I can, become friends with them, or at least, colleagues, professional friends. And next thing I know, they might tell me about a job opening for a dream job that I wanted. And guess what? I know the HR director, so I might be more likely to get an interview than somebody who doesn't know me at all. That happens all the time. So you never know who else is volunteering in organizations that may be able to help you in some way, shape, or form down the road. And I'm not saying that you do it to get that, but that's a byproduct. So there's lots of benefits to volunteering.
So let's say we've motivated enough listeners to be interested in volunteering. Where would be one place, I know it's very localized, but are there places that are generally good places to start in finding volunteering opportunities? Where would I go? I'm in Montreal, Canada.
Gosh.
Are there certain resources that I can go to, or ways at least to find those resources to know how to volunteer and where to volunteer?
Sure. I think most bigger cities have, organizations that can help connect you. You can go online and find places that will help connect you. I think the way that I kind of go about it, and that I think is probably the most effective, is to think about things that that connect your heart. So what are things that you love? So for example, for me, I love dogs. I love animals. And so it seems reasonable to maybe go to the local humane society and see if they have a need for something in my skill set. Maybe I could walk dogs. Maybe I could help them with their social media. Maybe I can help coordinate volunteers for a particular event. find things that are close to your heart, and then find an organization that matches that. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck and the most joy. For example, I help out with a group here in town that works on trails, and I'm new here in this town. I'm not connected with a network yet, so I don't have those kind of connections. But guess what? They needed help learning how to take money at an event. You know what? I know technology. I know how to set up Square or PayPal or ChatterUp or something. So I can help them with that. And that's micro volunteering because I help them with one small thing, but I'll go back because I really like the organization. So figure out where your heart is, what makes your heart happy, and find organizations that match it. That's the best way to go about it.
I had the privilege of being a volunteer multiple times in my life, starting as a dog walker in San Francisco. I used to foster cats here in Montreal. And I even was helping with an eco ranch. I was building furniture out of wood in Sri Lanka. And each of these experiences had a tremendous impact in my life. And to your point, things that are very dear and close to my heart. So animals and furniture. This is something I hope to do in my future, is build more furniture. So I figured, why not start that process by building furniture for this eco ranch in the middle of nowhere?
Isn't that fantastic?
It was so rewarding.
Yeah. And look at the experience. I mean, not only did you volunteer, but you got to see the culture and the people, and you got to travel. There was all sorts of elements at play there, right? So not only did you help them, but they helped you.
Are there any particular, so you mentioned interest, but is there anything that a person can do to, I was going to use the word like improve their skills to be better volunteers, or like, is there certain skill sets that are more in demand overall than others? Or is it, listen, as long as you have the heart to volunteer, find something that fits your heart and your path and then just volunteer? Or is there something a little more calculated than that, I guess is my question.
Oh, I think nonprofits need all sorts of talent. And really, they just need a willingness of somebody to help. Sometimes it's just somebody being there. For example, we had an event recently at a nonprofit I'm with that needed somebody to stand at a booth at a table during a brew fest and hand out brochures about the organization. Really, that doesn't take any kind of skill set. It takes a friendly person. So maybe that is a skill set. But it takes somebody willing to, to sit or stand at a table for a few hours. It has to do with the willingness, not so much the skill set. I mean, if you're willing, they're going to find a place for you to help. You just have to be willing.
One of my first contracts, my first clients in Salesforce was actually a nonprofit here in Montreal. And it's a volunteering organization in the sense that they find volunteers locally. They have over 10,000 now in their database. And then they work with other nonprofits and they match the volunteers that they have with the cause and the nonprofit. And it's a fantastic organization that really, so Big Brothers Big Sisters has this big event. They need people to hand out pamphlets. Who do we have in our database to do that? And then they make the introduction and do the matching. And
that is fantastic. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
is there
and, let's take that one step further, because a lot of companies now are starting, bigger companies, I would say, pay for some of their workers to volunteer for a day a year. They'll pay you to go out and volunteer for a cause. Think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, Salesforce itself, actually, as a company, has this give back, the 1% pledge, where they actually donate 1% of their yearly time. All employees have to donate 1% of their time to a volunteering cause.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Which I think is wonderful, yeah. We actually had one here in Montreal again, where we were picking up trash in the spring around the canal.
Nice.
Organized by the Montreal user group here. So that was really great.
Isn't that great? Yeah, and it goes back to, you can just do informal volunteering. You can just take a trash bag and go out to a trail or the side of the road, just be safe about it and pick up garbage. I mean, that helps the world. And that you can do that on whatever level you want, for an hour or, once a week or once a month. You can do it however you want, but that's giving back.
Is there anything that can be done or said to the nonprofits who are looking for volunteers? Because up until now, we talked a lot about the volunteers' perspective, but from the nonprofit perspective, let's say you have a need, you could use volunteers in your organization or your cause.
Mhm.
Like, is there anything that they can do, or any words that we can add of to guide them, to help them to either find volunteers or to announce that they need volunteers? Anything to be said about that?
I think it's really important that nonprofits nowadays are relevant to the generations that are willing and able to help. So I don't think it's realistic for them to say, hey, I need you to, set up this entire event that's going to happen in a month. I think they need to look and say, we need somebody to just put it on social media for us. I think they need to break things down into smaller pieces, and I think they need to be relevant. So they need to be things that interest this younger generation so that they want to help. I think that we need to remember that we have, like right now, we have 4 generations in the workforce for the first time ever. And there's a lot of impatience and intolerance between the generations and a lot of frustration. And I think we need to take a step back. And I think we need to look at what's important to each of those generations. I know that's really speaking broadly, but we need to remember that my experience as a Gen Xer, for example, is very different from the experience of a Gen Zer right now. And I have to remember that. And they have different skills, and they were raised on technology. I wasn't. So we need to embrace their skills and embrace what they bring to the table and allow everybody to bring their gifts to the table, because we're all different.
Any technology that can be used to help this movement, this growing either awareness or encouragement, or because I know that technology, and we've talked about earlier, it sometimes have gotten us into this situation. Is there any technology that can get us out of it, or is it just not a tech issue at all? Or
well, I think my personal opinion of that is that technology is a lot like fire. It can be used for good or evil. I think there's some technologies that certainly nonprofits have to embrace, not just should embrace, but have to embrace. They have to embrace communication tools, donation or giving tools, financial tools. For example, I don't want to volunteer for an organization whose books are questionable, or or sketchy, or where the treasurer's report is, hey, everything's okay, don't worry about it. We have enough money in the bank. I don't want that. As a volunteer, I want to make sure that I'm volunteering in a place that is stable and well managed. And so, financial tools, I have to say this because I have financial software that I use and I sell. I want an organization that is using technology to strengthen the organization. And so those kinds of tools and technology are really important that they embrace and that they use them. I think there's a place where they can go too far. For example, I think there's a strategic use of technology that will improve like an organization's efficiency. And I think that sometimes groups will bite off more than they can chew. So maybe they'll buy all of this different software technologies, but they don't have the volunteer power to actually implement it or use it. So I think you need to figure out what you want to accomplish, what your mission is, and go from there. And if you have 3 key volunteers that run the show, be realistic about what 3 people who are volunteers, meaning they have a life outside of this, can reasonably accomplish. So leverage technology, but be reasonable.
And I would add to that, it does actually, and I would add to that and be more tactical is, for example, your sign-up form. If you have a sign-up form on your website, make sure it's easy. Don't add or ask 50 questions when 5 questions is really all you really need. So don't frustrate the potential volunteer from signing up, for example. And then make sure the overall onboarding process is easy. If you start adding more and more, I mean, I understand sometimes you need to have security checks, if depending on what kind of volunteering that you're doing.
Sure.
But aside from those kinds of checks and balances, don't overly stress the whole situation or the volunteer, because you want them to help. You don't want them to have roadblocks along the way. So just making sure that technology can help you in those processes to streamline the process, to make it simple, easy as you can, at least.
Right. So I have an interesting example of that. I did some volunteer work about a year ago for a group that decided to use a sign-up form online for this fun run. Well, when you got to the event and you wanted to sign up for this fun run at the site, there was probably a queue of about 70 people waiting to sign up. They had one computer. You couldn't do this on your own device. And they asked all sorts of questions. Well, guess what? A good majority of those people went away because it was just too hard and took too long. So you got to make it easy for people. You got to make it easy. And that means not asking things that are not important. You gotta key in on what's absolutely mission critical and let the rest go.
And maybe make sure it's mobile friendly, because everybody's on their mobile devices these days.
Yeah. Before that event, I had recommended that because it was at the tail end of COVID. It was after COVID. And I had recommended that they put some posters up with QR codes to a form so that people could just, take a picture of the QR code and do it on their device and not have to get near anybody. And that just didn't happen, unfortunately. And that was an organization that lost a lot of money that day. Yeah. So you kind of have to anticipate and realize that, the attention span and the tolerance level of human beings nowadays is quite short and getting shorter every day. So you have to really zone in on what is most important that you need to collect.
Looking ahead to the future, I mean, I'm hoping that the trend of volunteering doesn't keep on declining. And we've talked about the optimistic perspective of, wouldn't that be great if more people did? Any other thoughts about the future of volunteering, where, either how we can help shift things along, or any upcoming things, maybe, if you want to talk about AI, for example, because that's obviously the topic these days, if there's any measure of AI that can help us achieve a greater impact or a greater willingness to volunteer. Any other future trends that you see coming down, either optimistically or, less optimistically?
Gosh, AI scares me, so I don't know if I want to go there. That's just my age speaking. Trends. If I looked at data, so let's say more than 90% of nonprofits are small and community-based nonprofits. 90%. So those are the ones serving local needs in your area. I think the trend needs to be either schools or parents or the community members creating opportunities and teaching and modeling how important volunteerism is. So maybe there are projects in school that can be done. I know there already are in a lot of schools, but maybe that's pushed a little bit harder. Maybe parents model that behavior more. Maybe business people create opportunities where, kids can go and volunteer and feel safe about it and good about it and really lend their skills. That's kind of where I see the future is going. I'm sure AI is going to play a huge role. I don't know what that is yet.
Yeah, for the record, I don't have any predictions about AI and volunteering either, but it's curious. It definitely will have an impact with the many different things.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Yep.
We'll have to just wait and see.
Yeah.
Well, listen, this has been awesome. I love this conversation, very down to earth, and hopefully it'll help some people. So I was wondering if anyone had any questions for you, follow-up questions, or any ways that they can reach you online. How would they do that?
Absolutely. So Myself and my team can answer anything finance related. And you can just go to info@moneyminder.com. And if you want to reach out and ask questions, I love talking about volunteerism. So certainly you can find me at Moneyminder, and I'd be happy to talk about this subject. It is so close to my heart, and it's something I think about and talk about every single day.
Why don't you give a quick shout out to Moneyminder, because we didn't talk too much about the organization that you're with. So maybe you just give me a quick...
Right. So Moneyminder is bookkeeping software for small nonprofits, volunteer-run nonprofits. So we have a lot of parent groups, HOAs, booster clubs, Rotary clubs, you name it, that use our software. These are all volunteers, so they're not necessarily accountants or bookkeepers in their personal lives. So we make bookkeeping really easy so that you can be the treasurer of an organization and not have any experience at all. And we hold your hand the whole way. And we love what we do because we get to deal with volunteers every day. Who gets a better customer base than that?
This is awesome. Cyndi, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Alex. I sure had fun. Thank you.
All right, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.